welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special series. I'm Shereen Bhan. My guest today single-handedly took down one of India's largest pharma companies, Ranbaxy. A former insider, Dinesh Thakur's revelations as a whistleblower resulted in the US regulators fining Ranbaxy $500 million for violating federal drug safety laws and making false statements to the Food and Drug Administration. Earlier this year, Dinesh Thakur moved the Supreme Court and his PIL sought the creation of a framework for the recall of drugs and a commission to examine faulty drug approvals. A bench led by the Chief Justice, Mr. Thakur, dismissed that petition, but Dinesh Thakur's campaign continues. Joining us now to discuss what could be the hidden truth about India's pharmaceutical industry is the man himself. Dinesh Thakur, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and so let me start by asking you the question that was posed to you by Justice Thakur and the Supreme Court when you filed that petition. They asked you, an overseas citizen has come all the way to challenge a rule. What is your locus? Why are you bothered? Why do you care? The criticism is that perhaps you're trying to paint an alarmist situation.
Well, I think that, as a country, we've been complacent for way too long. If you want to call me an alarmist, I will wear that as a badge of honor. I think for the last 50-odd years, we've been sort of, accepted the fact that this is how the way things are. And especially in the last two and a half years since the Ranbaxy case broke, there have been a significant number of improvements in the way our medicine is manufactured, but unfortunately those improvements are targeted primarily toward export markets. And so
you're saying the domestic market is not reaping the benefits of the stringent regulations that perhaps Indian manufacturers are now following as far as exporting drugs are concerned?
Well, the question actually is, making two implicit assumptions. You said stringent regulations and the benefits of what has actually happened for the export quality medicines. This is precisely the reason why I think we went to the Supreme Court, because if you look at our regulators, if you look at what they've been able to do, right, other than making statements around we'll do spot checks or we'll prosecute people who are doing this, that, and the other. There have been 44 manufacturing facilities in India that have been joined from exporting to the United States. How many of those actually are prohibited from making products for the Indian market? And why is that, right? And so what had happened was, after the Ranbaxy case broke and this became a topic in public conversation, there were a lot of different points of view that came up. The industry obviously had its point of view, saying this was a one-off case. There were well-meaning, well-intentioned public health activists that said, the Western pharma companies are out to make Indian genetic industry make it look bad. And there are enough sort of conversations in public view saying that we have this regulation in place where people are sent to jail for making substandard drugs. They would on television programs, like some with your channel and other channels as well. And the point was, at that point, I started asking myself, is that really true? Because I'd worked in the industry for 18 months or so when I was with Ranbaxy, and my recollection, my experience was that was far from the truth. But the point is, at that point, if I said something, it was my opinion against the opinion of somebody else in the industry. Unless I had data to substantiate.
So let's talk about the data. And I just have, not access to the kind of data that you have, because you've been working on this, as you said, for the past 2 years or so. But if I were to look at what is publicly available, and this is the CDSCO's survey of 2009, the percentage of spurious drugs detected in the Indian market has wavered between 0.3% in 2003-04 to 0.17% in 2007-08. The percentage of substandard drugs, or what's called NSQ, has been on the higher side, as high as 7.5% in 2004-05, before falling to about 6.3% in 2007-08. What are the numbers that you have? Does this give us a sense really of the problem, or is the problem far worse?
See, again, the issue here is that I think you have to trust some numbers. I know that there have been studies, for example, conducted by foreign authors that have found higher percentage of NSQ drugs. But the point here is that the conversation gets hijacked, if we start quoting those numbers. I'm going to go by what CDS's numbers are. Right? The report that was submitted to the Lok Sabha in 2009, I think 10 or 11, talks about 7% or 6.5% of non-standard drugs. That is the reality of what CDSCO wants to project. Okay.
So you're saying that's not the reality?
No, because here's the issue, right? Through the RTI process, we've asked, what basis, what is your statistical model on which you've sampled these drugs, right? In order to get an accurate representation of the reality of the quality of our drugs in this country, we have to know, are we only sampling a certain kind of drugs? Do we get a representative sample? Are we sampling only from cities, or not the towns and rural villages that we're doing, right? There is, and specifically to address this issue, we asked the CDSCO and the 36 state regulators. We've asked them, can you please tell us, how is it that you establish quality? So one of the questions that comes up quite often is that why is it foreign regulators find problems with our manufacturing facilities and our regulators don't? And the issue here is not that we don't know how to look for it. Our law doesn't actually look at that way. We look at quality in the final product. If you look at the Drugs and Cosmetics Act,
not in the manufacturing process itself.
Exactly. So our people are not trained to look at that.
We don't look at what the FDA, etc. do.
And the fact is, science has evolved to a point where it's not as simple as punching tablets with API to make a drug. Look at the number of fixed dose combinations we have in this country. Forget about fixed dose combination, extended release medicines, parental drugs, injectables that we make right now. They require a certain amount of process and science that goes into the process. If you only look at the final product, right, it may actually be that final product may comply with your standards at a point in time, right? But we know that every product that we buy has a date of stability on it, right? It tells you when it expires.
Right.
Do we really know what the date is based on? Because there are many states in this country today give out manufacturing licenses without requiring you to tell the regulator how long your product is stable for. How do you believe at that
So let's get back to the data issues, because there are several issues and this is a complex matter.
It is.
So let's break this down for our viewers. So you're saying that we focus on the product, not necessarily the manufacturing process, which is different from what the global regulators are monitoring or assessing at this point in time. But go back to the data that you've been able to get by way of the RTI process to tell us how different is the picture from the numbers that I, for instance, just read out as per the CDSCO's own findings.
So if you look at what we've done is we've actually looked at states, because this is where the regulation is actually enforced in individual states and state drug regulators. We've looked at their own records. We've asked them, how do you do sampling? How many samples do you collect? Where do you send these samples to get analysis done? What kind of results do you get? And if you get a non-standard drug from if the Central Drug Lab in Kolkata or in Lucknow actually tells you that this is a non-standard drug, what do you do with it? How do you take that forward? How do you conduct an investigation? How do you prosecute?
What are the answers?
The answers are completely varies between one state to another. The southern states actually do a reasonably good job, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. But the fact is that we don't have consistency, and even when the regulators, the inspectors want to do the right thing, the people who are actually found guilty are not prosecuted according to the fullest extent of the law. So the numbers that the CDSCO reports and has been reporting are significantly underreported based on the data that Central Drug Labs actually provided to us.
Okay. So let me then ask you, is this a problem of the regulation or the problem of the regulator? I mean, we just discussed the multiplicity of regulators, and clearly that seems to be an area of concern. But do you believe that the bottom line is that in law we are not adequately protecting consumers?
I think you can't separate these two things out. The regulators and the regulatory system is a consequence of the regulation, right? If the regulation that was actually written and before we became independent in 1940s, when states didn't exist, provinces were there, that regulation hasn't kept pace. For example, I'll give you a very simple example.
We're talking about the Drugs and Cosmetics Act.
Absolutely. So in India, we say if a new chemical or a biological drug that's not present in the market, if that ever comes in, that's called what's classified as a new drug, and that status exists for 4 years. That has to be approved by the Central Drug Regulator, CDSCO. After 4 years, it becomes the remit of the state regulators, and there is no requirements today in our law for any state drug regulator to ask the manufacturer, can you prove to us that what you're making actually is therapeutic?
Okay.
We give out manufacturing licenses without requiring any of these manufacturers today to prove that these drugs are bioequivalent. Drugs Consultative Committee has debated this point, and they basically said, look, because of infrastructure issues, we don't want to mandate our manufacturers to do that. I don't understand this, right? On one hand, we say, we are a clinical research country, we do so many biostudies, right? Well, we can do biostudies for export. Why can't we do biostudies for our internal consumption as well? Why are there two different standards? I mean, are lives any less meaningful in India compared to...
So the issue of whether a drug is therapeutic or not is now being debated on the back of the recommendations that have come in dealing with this whole business of fixed dose combinations, and of course that continues to be controversial. But you're saying the process of approval itself is flawed.
Because our drug regulation doesn't require the regulators to actually ask the manufacturer who applies for a license to manufacture a drug, prove to us that the product that you're making actually is therapeutic. So unless you change the law, unless you change the regulation itself and tell the regulators that that's a part of your approval process, you need to demand.
So the conversation that you and I are having on the issues that need to be addressed, this is not a new conversation, because I understand that this is a conversation that's been had by the Standing Committee, which has tabled its report, the 59th Standing Committee. In fact, the Katoch Committee had also suggested and recommended that there be changes as far as the regulatory mechanism and regulatory structure is concerned. So this is a matter that has been debated and discussed by parliamentary standing committees. What's been the response? You've, I know, been trying to reach out to this government, previous governments as well. Has there been any action taken?
See, this, as you yourself said, right, this is a complex issue. This is not an issue of call drops, right? You drive from Gurgaon to here, you try to be on the phone, call drops 5 times. As a common person, I know when my phone goes dead. But as a common lay person, it's very hard for me to figure out that the medicine that I take, that's been given to me, is working or not. Specifically, if you're prescribed medicine for chronic stuff, right? If you have fever doesn't go down, you go back to the doctor and say, fever kam nahi ho raha hai. How many times has it happened to you, or the people that you know, the doctors here say, dawai aapko suit nahi karti, aapki dawai badal denge. Have you ever asked the doctor, what do you mean by dawai suit nahi karti hai? It's the same chemical, right? Why are they changing medicines? Why are they changing manufacturers and giving you the same medicine from a different manufacturer? The point I'm trying to make here
is... But you can't naturally conclude that is because it's substantive.
I'm not. All I'm saying is that this is a complex issue, right? In order to create awareness around this, it is going to take dialogues of this nature where where we get this in public discussion, right? Call drops are much easier. Your phone goes dead, you understand the call has got disconnected. Medicine that you've been taken, that you've been given to control your hypertension for life. If that doesn't work, there is nothing like a switch in our body that just flips up and says, okay, this medicine is not working. The long-term effects for us as a country are humongous if you're not paying attention to this.